Start today's session by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. So, page number 'Base of Infinite Space', please. So that's page number 46. Dil, could you kindly read, please? So number 46, the base of infinite space. We are going to read through the sutta, and so Dil, if you may read up until the base of neither perception or non-perception, and then we will go into the explanation altogether. Dil, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Can you hear me now, Bante? Sorry about that. So page number 46 and item number 6, the base of infinite space. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk not attending to the perception of forest, not attending to the perception of earth, then attends to the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. His mind plunges into the perception of the base of infinite space, brightens with faith, becomes steady, and is resolute. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of forest, there are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of earth, they are none here. There is only this much disturbance, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the perception of forest. This field of perception is empty of the perception of earth. There is only this non-emptiness, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. Thus, he regards what is not there as empty, but as to what remains there. He knows what that is. Thus, there is this. Thus, Ananda, this is his truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into emptiness. Item 7, the base of infinite consciousness. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk, not attending to the perception of earth, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, then attends to the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. His mind plunges into that perception of the base of infinite consciousness, brightens with faith, becomes steady, and is resolute. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of earth, there are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of the base of infinite space, there are none here. There is only this much disturbance, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the perception of earth. This field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of infinite space. There is only this non-emptiness, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. Thus, he regards what is not there as empty, but as to what remains there, he knows what that is. Thus, there is this. Thus, Ananda, this is truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into emptiness. Item 8, the base of nothingness. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, then attends to the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. His mind plunges into that perception of the base of nothingness, brightens with faith, becomes steady, and is resolute. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of the base of infinite space, there are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, there are none here. There is only this much disturbance, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of infinite space. This field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. There is only this non-emptiness, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. Thus he regards what is not there as empty. But as to what remains there, he knows what that is. Thus, there is this. Thus, Ananda, this is truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into emptiness. Item number 9, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, then attends to the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. His mind plunges into the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, brightens with faith, becomes steady, and is resolute. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, there are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be because on the perception of the base of nothingness, there are none here. There is only this much disturbance, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. This field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of nothingness. There is only this non-emptiness, namely the oneness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Thus, he regards what is not there as empty. But as to what remains there, he knows what that is. Thus, there is this. Thus, Ananda, this is truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into emptiness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Dil. All right. So if we go into, so we have studied in previous classes, through previous sutras, through discussions of meditation, through our Abhidhamma study as well, we have a certain idea of what the Rupa Vachara and the Arupa Vachara jhanas are, right? Now, if someone is to seek for a definite definition, a definite clear definition of what a specific jhana is, one is always directed to, or the person who is to answer that question should always or will always clearly answer the question with accordance to the jhana factors which are present in that specific jhana, right? if someone is to ask you, what is the first jhana? Then we know the first jhana is Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekagata. Right? A jhana is a state, it is a manifestation of Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha. The first jhana is a manifestation of Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekagata. The fourth jhana and above, or the fifth jhana and all the Arupavachara jhanas are manifestations of equanimity and Ekagata, one-pointedness, right? Those are the factors which project a love for the entrance and being within and experiencing a jhana, an absorption. These positions of mental calm and solitude are brought about by the training of the mind. When we talk about Suññata, when we speak about Suññata, when we are to understand Suññata, it is very important to understand the meaning of what a nimitta is. A nimitta is a sign, right? Now, everything that we would go through, we experience signs each and every single moment, right? In meditation, we know when our mind comes into a state of calm and tranquility, or when we sort of project us or sort of progress along, not project, progress along the path of meditation, we experience visuals. These visuals are not essentially created by us. However, they are a manifestation of that present mind, right? For example, if one is to see if it is a nimitta or if it is in the process of forming a nimitta, let's say that the nimitta is of a darker tone, a darker color, then a person who knows, a person who understands how the mind manifests that darker color, right? When the mind progresses along that same meditation in the correct manner, what happens is these darker tones now start transforming or changing itself into lighter, more sort of lustrous tones of color. That is a projection again of what? That level of samadhi, that level of, that not insight, that level of mental concentration. As we in mind become lighter and lighter and lighter, we see in drawing parallels with this nimitta, for the sake of understanding what a nimitta is, we see that the nimitta or the colors that we experience will also change, right? Will also change into lighter, more lustrous, more sort of pleasurable, more very divine tones, right? That is a manifestation. Let's come down. Let's talk more basic. What is a manifestation of a sign in ordinary life? You look at your grandchildren, you look at your children who you might love very much, or you look at your mother, your father, right? What is the manifestation that these people have in your life? If it is a child that who you dearly love, if it is a parent who you dearly love and remember, that object is manifests a sign of love, compassion, maybe anger, lust, restlessness, delusion, whatever it is, right? It manifests greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. Understood, isn't it? I mean, everything that we have, isn't it? Right? Everything that we would have in our life. If you've bought a TV, back in the day when you bought the TV initially, that specific brand, that specific sort of series, you were very happy with it. Couple of years go by, oh, now it's old. Now every time that you see the TV, you are reminded, oh, I should get a better TV. Now it's time to get a better TV. Now, see, the sign changes, right? That is a connection and the bondage that we have, or our mind has, to that specific object. In this, is that understood? Yes, please nod your heads. Right, that is understood. So everything has a sign. I'm sorry, everything can be a sign, right? Almost like the traffic lights. When it's red, you know you have to stop. When it's green, you know how that you have to go. When there's a sign on the road which says that there's a curve ahead, you know you're prepared for a curve ahead, right? You are so good at driving, now you don't even think. You don't even think that you need to stop. You just stop, isn't it? It's almost involuntary, right? In secular Buddhism or secular mindfulness, we know the word that they use is autopilot, right? Autopilot. Now, have that knowledge of what that sign is. Now you understand what a sign is and what we are referring to as a nimitta. Now, as we progress along the path of understanding Suññata, we know ultimate descent into Suññata and experience of the highest state of Suññata is enlightenment, right? Is enlightenment. Suññata is the missing of something or the missing of the other, right? The missing of the other, right? Something is, or that which was there before is now missing, right? Let me explain. Of course, I had to explain my class. All right. So then what is it, right? Now, let's go into the base of infinite space and these other meditations that we are doing. We started off with this perception of the village, the perception of people, and we sort of grew from it to a state where now we were in the jhanas. Mind you, the word disturbance is repeated repeatedly throughout this sutta. Disturbance, every paragraph, every line almost has the word disturbance. What is disturbance? First of all, disturbance is when the sutra started initially from the villagers to the people. The sutras, the word disturbance meant the hindrances, right? The hindrances, those factors that disrupt your understanding of the reality of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, right? A Kalyana Mitra is a person who helps in this, right? Hence known as a Kalyana Mitra, a good friend. Disturbance is always something which distracts you from that path. These disturbances, as we progressed along the sutta, today we are in the arupa jhanas or the formless jhanas. Now, what are the disturbances? Of course, hindrances are still there. However, whilst we are speaking of the hindrances, we also speak about that attachment to the formless sphere itself, right? Because from the jhanas, the first jhana, remember how we got rid of the gross factors. With each stage of jhana, we got rid of those almost like luggage, right? We got rid of that heaviness, that weightiness of the jhana, allowing us to excel into a higher state of blissful concentration and absorption. In the practice of Suññata, we go through a process of experiencing these jhanas And as we experience the jhanas and our mind excels with that experience, we are able to now see the faults of the attachment or the impermanence of that state, right? Of that state. It is almost as if, um, a very mundane example. Okay, often an excuse for people, when they go to sort of buy a vehicle is, oh, this vehicle does petrol better, or, this more fuel efficient or more comfortable. But when you get that car now, after a couple of months, you feel like you could do better petrol. You care that much about the environment, you see. So you now want to get a car that does even lesser petrol. Or you're sitting on those leather seat covers or seats, and now still you feel like it could be a bit more comfortable. The jhana experience, when you have it, when you experience it at that state, when before you had it, you thought, oh, this might be the ultimate experience. Because we did not experience that state. When we experience that state, you now get to know the sort of the grossness on that level. The vipassana or that we bring into these jhanas. Now, Suññata it's a vipassana-based practice, right? However, the approach that we take is in a very cheeky way through the jhanas, right? Why I call it a cheeky way is because our focus is on the jhanas and developing the jhanas. However, we are also equipped with this understanding of wisdom that the ancient practitioners of jhanas did not have. What is that? This element of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Right? Now, in the Cula Suññata Sutta, the main focus or elaboration of the elements of all of these sectors of jhana that we have studied is by the base of impermanence. While the Mahasuññata, there are two Mahasuññata sutras, those two sutras go into suffering and non-self. This sutta that we are currently doing focuses on the attribute of impermanence, right? On the attribute of impermanence. By the power of that attribute of impermanence, what we see here is the nature of weakness within that connection we build with that specific respective jhana at that specific time, right? At that specific time. So when we get to experience a jhana, we know the faults, allowing us to now develop from the base of infinite space to let go of that and go deeper into the base of infinite consciousness, right? The base of infinite space, had something which was derived from what? It was derived through the perception of the earth, a earth kasina, a mundane, a rupa-based nimitta, right? A rupa-based nimitta, right? I hope you understand what a rupa-based nimitta is, meaning the earth kasina is developed through looking at a secular piece of earth, a circular piece of earth, not a circular piece of earth, right? This circular piece of earth is, regardless of whether we see it or not, it is an attraction to rupa. We get rid of that attraction to rupa through progress into what is the arupa. Now, when we meditate, let's bring a practical aspect into this. When we meditate, right, I would say almost all of you have some sort of, you all have some sort of understanding of Dhamma. You have some sort of belief and logical reasoning to say the Dhamma is true. However, let's say the moment that you, in your meditation, when you're meditating and this thought comes up, you're trying to impose the knowledge of impermanence to that thought, so that you are able to move on, right? We've done it, we've all done it, right? However, there is some sort of a fight there, isn't it? Almost a sort of a like an arm wrestling moment. Right? There is a sort of a fight there that we have with the mind, right? And what wins, right? That fight, that sort of a bit of friction that we experience, that experience being us trying to make a point, make the mind understand, right? Make the mind, convert the mind, right? That is a friction itself. You see, arahants don't need to do that, right? That friction itself points to us that we are with a certain attraction to that sign, right? Meaning, yes, we don't like, it is like that study which was done, you see, in Sri Lanka, there was a study which was done by this professor, I can't remember his name, but the study was, the attraction that we have to suffering, right? So the attraction that we have to suffering. So the professor himself, being a Buddhist, he did this research to see, everyone is like, oh, I want to attain Nibbana, I want to attain Nibbana, I want to attain Nibbana, right? In that sort of Buddhist Sri Lankan concept. And what he found was that we are more attracted to the fight towards, or the inability to practice towards Nibbana, than actually achieving and attaining and being with Nibbana. Right? Because then that sense of something, you see, that sense of something, Suññata is the nature, or is the practice where we recognize the missingness of that something, if you understand what I mean, right? Now, this thing that I held on to in this, there's a big picture. However, my connection to this was, connection to that picture was this. Now, this is missing. That is what we try to get off. At each state, we try to get rid of that specific attraction that we have. Slowly moving on. See, in the start of the sutta, the village was so important to us. We were sort of floating with the ups and the downs of people, the attitudes, the hindrances, people cry, I cry, people happy, I'm happy, that kind of thing. We abandoned that. We came out of that, allowing the person, allowing the person to then proceed from that mentality of being attached, to proceed from that mentality of being attached to those sort of concepts of high and low, into a state of jhana. From that jhana, from the rupa jhanas into the arupa jhanas. Now in the arupa jhanas, we experience a state of going deeper into getting rid of that said connection that we have, right? Getting rid of that said connection that we have. Now, from the base of infinite space, we go on to the base of infinite consciousness, right? From space to consciousness, to the base of nothingness. But in the base of nothingness, now nothingness, sounds like Suññata, isn't it? Sounds like Suññata, right? Sounds like Suññata. However, again, when we are at that place, what do we realize? We realize that there is a perception underlining that absorption. Then we come into a base of neither perception nor non-perception, right? This base of neither perception nor non-perception, I don't want to go into the jhanas, we've already done that, right? We've already done that. But what I want to emphasize is, we shift our mind essentially from the village, from the people, those who live with hindrances, to a mentality of jhana. From jhana into arupa jhana, formless, right? Somewhat going beyond the attachment that we have to that which is based by form. From the formless, then we go into this experience of a very high state of subtlety of mind, right? A very fine state where we are able to recognize the perception, the neither perception nor non-perception. But even at that state, what is then suññata? Suññata is then this process of bringing in vipassana into the practice of arupa jhana, is where we have been at. That was a development of shunyata. So through the mind, we have been looking at something, looking at an experience, and that experience helped us to understand shunyata. How do we progress beyond that into what we know is enlightenment? That is where then we shift our attention. Let's page number 47, right? The signless concentration of the mind, right? Signless concentration of the mind. Now, do you have, before we move on, does anyone have any questions on this part from the start of the sutta up until this point? Any questions? Yes, Dil?
Just that I missed one. So at the very beginning, you said when you were looking at, now you're talking about this nimitta, the sign. So we had this ukkaha, patibhaga, learning or counterpart, we know that. But then you were talking about at the highest level, at the beginning, the highest manifestation is light, and suññata is when you're missing all the others. So did I hear right? Highest manifestation is the light. What did you say was the highest manifestation? You said something.
Highest
Sorry?
manifestation is the arupa last jhana, base of neither perception or non-perception.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Hold on, Bhante. Then the other thing I wanted to ask you is now you're talking here about going from the village to the people to the forest, and then from this from the rupa kasina jhanas going up to the space, and then consciousness, and then nothingness and neither perception, and then now going to suññata. So are you saying, Bhante, then that, and then of course from there, how do you go to Nibbana? So are you saying then that everybody who has to go to Nibbana, that you have to be going through all these rupa jhanas and arupa jhanas and then go? I thought that you can have concentration enough for like the first jhana, and that you that level, and that you could go to vipassana. But are you saying now that we have to go to this, from...
We'll discuss that at the end, please.
Okay.
Okay. We'll discuss that at the end. Okay. So any others? No? Okay. The signless concentration.
Bhante, question.
Yes.
Question. It's way to say, Dharmasri. The question is, now you're talking about signs, yeah? So those are actually physical objects. No. When you are concentrating, or when you are contemplating on breathing meditation, what is the sign? Sign is not a solid object. Yeah. So how will it manifest then?
The sign, right? The sign is not a physical object, Damsiri.
Yeah.
The sign is the manifestation.
All right. Okay.
Now, for example, let's say, I don't know, cheesecake. Right? I mean,
yeah.
You know, I like, you know.
Okay.
You see, so then what's the sign? The sign is not the cheesecake. The sign is what is the manifestation of that cheesecake. You know what I mean? Right?
You mean image?
The result.
Yeah, okay.
Because look here, what do the noting mind, what does the noting mind note? The noting mind notes the result of that cognitive reaction.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
You know, now, for example, when I'm closing Chittanupassana, right? I'm thinking of someone, I'm thinking of something, right? That creates, cause of example, let's say anger, right? Now the sign is that anger, not the person who creates the anger.
Right.
Now, again, the nimitta that we derive from the earth or water or air, that is not physical, that is mental.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Got it, Veera?
Yeah. It's actually called Ugraha Nimitta.
Uggaha nimitta. Right? But we don't use the word Uggaha nimitta here because Uggaha nimitta exclusively refers to the derivative of kasina.
Yeah.
Okay? So nimitta, because it is now, let's say, I see a person, some sort of compassion arises. My interaction is with that compassion.
Yeah.
Right? My interaction is with that compassion. Right? When I'm doing Vedananupassana, pain arises. My friction is, let's say it arose on my shoulder, around my shoulder, right? My reaction or my fight now is now not with the shoulder, it's with the pain that I observe.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Everyone else? Yeah. Is that clear? Right. So the nimitta is that manifestation, it is not material. Right? It is not. However, that manifestation is there because of a material connection. That's another story. Right? It is because of that avidya and tanha connecting us to the 5 aggregates, which creates all of this nonsense. Right? Which has kept us here. Right? That's a different story. With regards to just the nimitta, we are only referring to what is the manifestation. Right? Which is creates. Yes, still.
Bhante, when you are doing Suññata meditation, so you close your eyes, and so first of all, it's like all inky dark, right? That there's just pure awareness. There's nothing, you can't see anything, no connection. It's dark. But then as you are going in that space right now, so I don't know whether that is in that, so that whatever that first nimitta will come from a cousin or whatever, no, that's gone off. And so you're in darkness. So we don't take a cousin like that, like the earth. We straight close your eyes, you say, and then so you're in dark. Then after some time, when you're purely with the awareness, without looking now what next, and all these things, but when you're just in that being, when you're just in that awareness and you're not looking for anything, what it is, all of a sudden there's no darkness. There's just, there's no color even. You don't even see anything. There's nothing like that, just that awareness. So that's what I asked you, whether
we are
ultimately
coming to that now.
Right.
Yeah, we are coming to that now. So
that is why I asked that question, whether at the end the highest is light, because I don't know, because that's the space where I'm in. So I don't know whether the end is just, is it light? Now I know you say that it is the arupa jhanas and it is that non percent, but does that manifest in the form of, there's something that is there, which is a bit uncomfortable, that gets missing, and that's what I noticed. Suddenly it goes and you're just in there. So does it sort of end up by, you're saying it becomes more lighter, it becomes more divine, it becomes, they say, I don't know, that the colors become very bright or something. I haven't experienced that. But is that what that it becomes lighter and brighter and things like that? Or is it that?
No, we'll come into that.
Okay.
We're going into that right now. Yeah, dear?
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Right. So, page number 47, everyone. Section 10, part 10. The signless concentration of the mind. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk, not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, then attends to oneness dependent on the signless concentration of the mind, Animate Samadhi, right? Animate Samadhi. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of the base of nothingness, there are none here. again, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the perception of the base of nothingness, there are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be because of the perception of neither perception nor non-perception, there are none here. There is only this much disturbance. There is only this much disturbance. Still there's disturbance, right? Still, even at the base of neither perception nor non-perception, there is disturbance. Let's see what that disturbance is. Namely, that connected with the sense sphere bases dependent on this body and conditioned by life, right? Conditioned by life. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of nothingness. This field of perception is empty of the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. There is only this non-emptiness, namely that connected with the six bases dependent on this body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards what is not there as empty, but as to what remains there, he knows what that is. Thus, there is this. Thus, Ananda, this is his truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into happiness, arahanthood through the signless concentration of the mind. Furthermore, Ananda, a monk attending to neither the perception of the fear of nothingness nor the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, attends to the oneness dependent on the signless concentration of the mind. His mind plunges into that signless concentration of mind, brightens with faith, becomes steady, and is resolute. He thus understands this signless concentration of mind is conditioned and volitionally produced. And whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent, subject to ending. When he understands thus, he sees thus. His mind is liberated from the canker of sense desire, from the canker of being and from the canker of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, freed am I. He knows that he is liberated. No doubts or qualms about it. He understands thus, destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What needs to be done has been done. There is no more of this state of being. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be on account of the canker of sense desire, there are none here. Whatever disturbance there might be on account of the canker of being, these are none here. Whatever disturbances there might be on account of the canker of ignorance, there are none here. There is only this much disturbance, namely that is connected with the six sense bases dependent on this body and conditioned by life. He understands thus, this field of perception is empty of the canker of sense desire. The field of perception is empty of the canker of being. The field of perception is empty of the canker of ignorance. There is only this non-emptiness, namely that connected with the six sense base dependent on this body, conditioned by life. Thus he regards what is not there as empty, but as to what remains there, he knows what that is. Thus there is this. Thus Ananda, this is his truly real, undistorted, utterly pure descent into supreme and unsurpassed emptiness. Now that is the final stage, right? Now, what was all of that? Right? Now, what was all of that? Now, when it comes to the state of neither perception nor non-perception, up until that state, we were experiencing, or what our practice included was looking at this absorption, the factors of the absorption, right? We looked at something, we observed something, right? Now, when I say observe, you might think, okay, in the way that you observe. But remember that at this state, your level of awareness is far, far, far more greater than you would ever comprehend. It is so fine, it is so lucid, clear, and so awake, right? So awake. It is because of that level of mentality that we are able to pick up the fine cracks, the fine linear impediments and impurities of that absorption. However, through that whole process, we were observing something. Now we turn the table. Yeah, the tables are being turned. How are the tables being turned? The mind which observed had the ability to sit on the throne. Throughout this whole journey, we sat on this throne of awareness and we were observing. We observed the perception of the village. We observed the perception of the people. We observed all of that. And we came into this realization dependent upon that observation that we were able to do, that awareness, that mindfulness, that all of that samadhi, right? And of course, vipassana. At this stage, what do we do? Or how further can we take the suññata to now attain to the greater sublime state of suññata? We turn the awareness upon the mind itself, right? It is almost as if taking the gun that you were eradicating all your disturbances with and you point it towards, okay, bad example, yourself, right? Sabotaging that the final string of craving and connection that you had. But of course, there is one connection that you cannot get rid of just yet. What is that connection? The connection bounded by life. The fact that you will breathe. The fact that your attraction, not attraction, the fact that you live. We know that complete nibbana is when you die, when you pass away after the attainment of nibbana or attainment of arahanthood, right? That is what is referred to as that connection with the six bases dependent on this body, and most important part, conditioned by life, that you can't get rid of. You can't make the sun not shine, right? That you cannot get rid of. Now, the perception, right? The perception of impermanence that we imposed upon each and every perception from village to neither perception nor non-perception, that same sense of impermanence is now drawn towards or is imposed now to the perception or this observing mind that we have. to the mind itself, right? To the mind itself, which allows, to the mind itself, which allows for the experience of, or the attainment of Nibbana. When the connection that we have even to this being, this self, is eradicated. Now remind yourself of the cankers that we get rid of at the last stage, right? That greed, the self, is now got rid of. How? Because of impermanence. Within this sutta, they speak about impermanence. So realization of impermanence with regards to that connection we maintained through that nimitta. I'm sorry. The connection that we maintained through this, the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, right? Remember now, this is a state of mind that we have come into. We have given it a name, so it sounds like something again, but it is the mind at that state. What we are doing is, this also becomes a nimitta, a sign, right? This is almost again as a sign that we get rid of, right? So this is also called, that technique is also called anti-vipassana. Anti-vipassana or vipassana, right? Remember, anicca dukkha anatma, anicca dukkha anatma, anicca dukkha anatma, everything anicca dukkha anatma, we were imposing it, we were understanding it through those essences. But the mind which understood, we never imposed vipassana onto that. So now vipassana gets rid of that vipassana. Do you get it? Right? Do you get it? The mind which perceived, or the mind which allowed for impermanence, suffering, and non-self to be understood in relation to these different objects of life. And with regards to this here, the jhanas, the absorption from rupa to arupa, we were doing vipassana. Now, this mind of vipassana, or that practice of vipassana, we turn it again and do vipassana on the vipassana, right? We do vipassana on the vipassana, which then allows for that ultimate nothingness to exist. Because again, just like we got rid of the sign and we had the space, right? The infinite space. Now we get rid of that mind completely, which was imposing that knowledge, which was clinging onto that knowledge completely and entirely. That is what then the attainment of arahanthood entails at that moment. At that moment, right? Remember that emptiness is not an abstract state. Emptiness is not an abstract state. It is a state which is to be an absolute qualification. It is something which absolutely exists. We, with the different signs that we create, we then distract ourselves, disturbances, distract ourselves from that nothingness. So now, for example, it's like, sometimes when you're used to working, and when you're used to sort of being in a rush, and then you have your Saturday or Sunday, day that the house is cleaned, the groceries are, the grocery shopping is done, the food is cooked, everything is done. Now you are sitting there and you're wondering, what should I do? It's very boring, maybe I should read a book. You see, we are not used to nothingness in any way of the word, right? We always employ these different signs around us to make ourselves feel fulfilled. So, of course, a person who is not doing anything does not mean that that person is going to be enlightened, right? Because that entryway into that state of shunyata can only arise with that kind of a mind. That is why shunyata meditation cannot be practiced by a person who does not have a high state of samadhi, vipassana or jhana based. It cannot. For example, upekha never arises in the first jhana. Upekha does not arise in the first jhana. Why? Because that state of balance, to have a state of equanimity and to base an absorption based on that state of equanimity is very difficult. Because why? We base ourselves, or we work with the extremes of pleasure and pain, on a spectrum of pleasure and pain, which allows for this human experience that we experience. Suññata can effectively be accessed only when we have a supportive state of samadhi consciousness, right? Only when we have a supportive state of samadhi consciousness. Now, when we go on to, right, any questions?
Yeah, something, please, Bante. So, Bante, now we were talking about, when we talk of sunyata, we are talking of emptiness now, this at the end. But when you were explaining, you use the word some point nothingness, but nothingness comes quite earlier in the arupa jhanas, because nothingness is not emptiness. So you go through nothingness, now you go through the other things first of all, and then you come to based on nothingness, then to neither perception or non-perception, and then only when you go to the animita, now you are coming on to emptiness, which is sunyata. So you can't really use nothingness and emptiness like mix them up, because that's one, right? So I understood
what I said was sounds like emptiness, no?
Right. Sorry. So I understand. The other thing I want to ask you, Bante, is that, am I right in thinking when we were explaining this, all this time we were like sitting on a throne and we were using vipassana at all these casinas and all these 4 stages of rupa jhanas, theoretically, I'm saying we were looking at each of them, and then suddenly when it's not there, only we say that it's not there, it's empty of that, then we go to the next stage. But now what you're doing is you're turning it inwards, and you're actually doing vipassana on the mind, but all this time the mind was doing vipassana on these objects. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
Thank you.
However,
thank you, Bante.
However, now with regards to, now please do not misunderstand, when the practice, as in when we say that we are doing vipassana, within the time of jhana concentration, there is no vipassana. The place where we do vipassana, for example, from the first jhana to go on to the second jhana, we realize that there are flaws within this first jhana, which lays way for the first jhana to be weak. We employ aspects of vipassana to get rid of the attachment we have to the first jhana, so that we can move on to the second jhana. That's the place that we use vipassana, right? We do not have vipassana throughout the practice of jhana. We come into a jhana and we realize, it is like, for example, it is a painter, after he paints the wall, and then after it dries, he sees, okay, maybe I should have cut the wall a bit more, right? Or he sees flaws in whatever, right? That is after. So we bring in vipassana after the state of jhana has arose and you have mastered it. That is what we do with each and every part, right?
So Bante, then what you're saying is, so now you do the first jhana and you go through all the vitakvita, all those, And so now you come and you say you can't do this vipassana while you are in that jhana. But when you come towards the end of it, that point where you have that, as you said, the samadhi, the upeka, right? The upeka and the ekaka, that's the point you suddenly see the flaws. That's that upeka. That's the last.
No, the flaws are in each jhana.
Yes,
Right?
but in each, yes, but in that jhana, you said at the end. So it's at the end of the vitakka that you see, right? I follow. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Bhante,
Yes.
pardon my ignorance, Bhante. This may be a stupid question. This Arupavachara jhana sounds very complicated.
Yeah.
And ancient Hindus needed it because there was no concept of Nibbana at the time. They went through the Rupavachara and Arupavachara jhana to go to the various levels.
Yeah.
But to attain Nibbana, you don't have to go through all this Arupavachara jhana, isn't it?
Well, it depends, really. It depends on. Well, it depends on what your faculties are, right? The thing is, Mala, at this point, to us, it might sound very complicated, right? I mean, for some, who are just starting off, even breathing meditation is a bit complicated. in sort of realizing where to focus while to sort of observe the breath, isn't it? So, but when we get to that level, it's not as complicated as the words may sound. However, your question is, do we need all of this?
Yeah.
Depends on the person. Some people are able to develop these parts, right? Now, for example, in the PAUK tradition, we go through each and every part of jhana through the kasinas, right? Through the kasinas to develop or go or make way into vipassana. That is what is believed as a path of practice in the PAUK tradition, right? In the PAUK tradition, traditions such as Mahasi would employ Shuddha Vipassana. However, when it comes to realizing what essentially would allow us to have this mentality, which allows us to then comprehend what Suññata is, you understand through this, Suññata is something we must attain to. Suññata is Nibbana. And look at this, Mala, this state of Suññata with regards to this whole entire sutta that we have done, it is a very, very fine spectrum. Getting into that fine spectrum of analysis of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, we need a base of strong concentration, vipassana samadhi. Sometimes the vipassana samadhi that we develop is sometimes very difficult to manifest and maneuver. Right? That is why we have the jhana practice to support that ability. Why? Because of the disturbance, nothing else. Because of the disturbances. So it really depends on our disturbances, our hindrances, right? We know some people meditate for a long time, but however they meditate, still they find it sometimes really difficult to find true standing, grounding. Why is that? Because the disturbances. This is because, or we go through this, it's in the Suññata Sutta, right? Out of all suttas, the Suññata Sutta, 3 in the whole Tipitaka, and relates directly to the sign of nothingness. Emptiness.
Emptiness.
Right? Emptiness. That is because the power of that samadhi, samatha samadhi, suppresses the hindrances to that sort of extent.
So what is Suddha Vipassana then?
They'll hold on, please.
Sorry.
So when we go on to go into a state of vipassana, or when we have to prepare our mind for a state of vipassana, we go through those signs into the signless, and then into what we know as suññata. So this is all in that state of preparing the mind to understand that fine sort of manure, which will allow us to understand what suññata is, which is really to do vipassana onto the mind itself. To understand impermanent suffering and non-self based on your existence itself. All this time we've been looking and using the world as our tool for vipassana. We looked at people who were dying to realize marnanusati. We looked at people who were our loved ones or who were suffering from impermanent suffering and non-self to develop metta and compassion. We used all those after we looked at food to develop asubha. We looked at the body, the impurities of the body to develop asubha. Now what we do is we direct it to our existence itself. That's a very hard thing, right? So I think rather than making a conclusion as to whether it's difficult or not, let's try to attain a jhana, right? Let's try to attain at least one jhana and then take it from there, right? Because, I believe in the saying, aim for the stars, at least you will hit the ceiling. Right?
Yeah.
Aim for the stars, at least you will hit the ceiling. At least you're going to develop that amount of, because that is going to manifest in your anapana. Right? That is, how difficult is it for people to observe the breath? I'm sorry, but how difficult is it for people to observe the breath without controlling the breath? Right? How difficult is it for people to mind a reaction and not to react to that sign? See, that is because of the lack of samadhi, right? Meaning lack of the suppression of hindrances, right? So in no way with this world that we are living in, how many things are going on, right? If we are to just take our minds off the Dhamma and just look at what's going around the world, what's happening in our lives, how many disturbances do we have? The amount of frustration or the amount of, everything, right? But that is a manifestation of the hindrances, which is here depicted by disturbances, right? So I think a state of absorption is rather important to the practice. Okay. Even in the Goenka tradition, you find Goenkaji, which starts from Lady Sayadaw, his tradition, right? Going into the jhana practice, or at least not going into the jhana practice, but going into anapana to develop a sense of samadhi, to then be able to go into vipassana, deeper sense of vipassana, right? If we have a strong sort of ability to develop this focus to that extent, I think we have a very good chance of attaining Nibbana in this very life. Damsiri, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, in this text, practically we changed from samatha to vipassana at the signless concentration of mind.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and the this is explained in the 3 doors of emancipation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. But here, the specialty is within the sutta, it takes impermanence. Impermanence is the base, right?
Okay.
And
All
they
right.
focus only upon the fact of impermanence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think the very curious thing that we bring to light through this sutta is the existence of a nimitta with regards to each and every object in the world,
Yeah.
including the mind that we
Okay.
have. So it is really like, for example, just imagine, it is really like the petals of the lotus, which covers like the middle of the lotus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have this nimitta sort of covering like that petal, sort of, so we see something entirely different. That is why when we sort of go into meditation and we have these disturbances of the mind, we find it somewhat difficult to sort of bring ourselves away from that disturbance, because
Yes.
our mind partly believes that that disturbance is saying the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we are trying to practice metta bhavana, and you're trying to, let's say, you don't like a certain person, and people can say, oh, Bhante, I'm not a person like that, but come on, come on.
Yeah.
We all have a person that we don't like, right? We might not show it, we might not show it, we might not reflect, we might not react upon it. However, we have qualms about ourselves. We have to get rid of those parts. But the difficulty in doing metta towards that person is the belief that your view upon that affair, that person, is true. As long as that exists, that is an impediment to the understanding of impermanent suffering and non-self. Right? Impermanent suffering and non-self. Something that Venerable Arya Dhamma used to tell us was, not us, right? I heard this from more senior bhikkhus, right? Was when monks used to go to Pau for retreats, right? And when they used to leave from Nawena, they used to tell, okay, because PAOK, essentially what they do is they don't go deep into jhana with each and every 40 parts of the 40 parts, right? So we have 40 samatha objects, right? So we do not go into deep jhana with all the 40. What we do is we develop a jhana, right? This jhana, let's say the first earth kasina, which is the first, right? We go into jhana, this jhana absorption might be weak, right? A bit of promotion. We have a jhana talk coming on the 6th of March, so be there.
Oh.
A bit of cheeky promotion.
Yeah.
But what we do essentially is we develop this jhana, which at that point could be weak. But then what we do is we are then advised, move to the next. So from Patavi, we move to Patavi Apo, right? The next element. With that, because we have a weak jhana, we go into the Patavi easier, and the jhana develops a little bit more. Still, it might be weak. However, we see the manifestation of the Apo element. And then we continue in that way. By the end of the 40, what we have is we've done everything. And now we arrive at a stronger jhana, able to go into Vipassana. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Right? That is a technique that they use at PAOK. Right? So, of course, there are certain prodigies of mind, who are very prodigious with their meditation. So what they do is they are able to go into the jhana quite fast and easy, right? So they are able to develop. But what would usually be done is they go through each and every 40 subject, each and every part of the 40 subjects of samatha to develop a stable samadhi, which can go on to vipassana. Some people do this within a year. Some people take on average about 3 years. Yes, dear.
I have several questions. This last one you were talking about, when you were doing about the Mahabhutas, and you're going from the Patavi to Apo Tejo, there also the last one is Vayo. So it comes down to that air element there also, isn't it? Even in the elements, when you're doing it, you are saying it goes from the Patavi, then it goes to Apo, Tejo, and it goes to Vayu. So there also, when you're doing the elements, the last one becomes finer and finer to Vayu. Am I right? When you're doing the elements?
Yes, I mean the last one is Vayu because it is relatively difficult to see.
Right.
Vayu, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to have so many questions to ask you, Bhante. Yes.
Shall we finish?
Bhante, I remember now. So now when we were page, I think where was this? Page 48. You were now. So we went through up to that stage of perception, neither perception, non. Now we are going from there. Now we are going to the animate, right? So at that point, when you are turning everything upside down and you're turning it onto yourself, you said it says that now you're looking at, so what is still there is the 6 bases, right? So isn't this, I remember somebody explaining this to us and said, so when you're doing the 6 bases, right? And then after that only you come to the emptiness. So, and you're talking, this is the essence of life itself. You're actually looking at the life. Isn't this that what was explained as, this is the vitality, the Ayu, right? The vitality, and which depends on 2 things, interdependent, and on the heat or the usma. Isn't that what you're talking about? At that point, there is just that life force, the Ayu or vitality that we're talking about, what is referring to the 6 bases. And there is the warmth, the usma, the heat of it. Because it was I can't remember, somebody who explained this, what was talking to us, when you go through all these jhanas and you come to the last stage, and then from there, where these bases, 6 bases.
That is completely wrong. That element that's true, but that's a very basic part of vipassana. You know, that is a very basic part of vipassana. Just imagine if you are seeing that at that state of nothingness, still that sort of depends or goes into, because we break that part at a very early stage in vipassana.
Right. So then this life force is just the breath, the Ayu is just the...
Now you can't ask me a question and then I explain it and then everyone else is confused. You must allow me to explain it, because you're repeating the question and then everyone else is confused by what I mean, right?
Right. Okay.
So wow. So this sense of warmth, right? When we do now, for example, when we do something wrong, let's say you hit someone, let's say you hit a child, right? For discipline, of course, regardless, whatever, right? You hit a child as a parent, right? Being Sri Lankan parents, maybe all of you have done it, you know. When you do it, now you see the child crying or you see the child sad, and that is how you know, oh, I shouldn't have done that, you know, and you feel bad about it, you see, right? You know, maybe, you know, I did, you know, I shouldn't have done it, or why did I have to do it, or you know what I mean, right? So now what made you feel bad? What made you feel bad is that sort of whole sort of scenario of actions, which is quite gross, right? That is what samatha is, right? That is what samatha is, because remember, it is through initial discipline that we develop the mind to a state where through sila, that we develop our way into samadhi. Remember, sila, samadhi, panya, right? So that is what helps us in samatha. However, when we cross from, or when we have to cross from samatha to samadhi to panya, right? What happens is, or the experience is, if you are doing, now this is something, you know, this is something, for example, now when we are in our forest monasteries and we develop, you know, go through samatha and then come into vipassana, and then let's say, you know, for example, have to fly back to Sri Lanka, or, you know, we come into the airport or have to come into town or something of that sort, you know, the sort of the actions or the manifestation of greed, hatred, delusion, now you feel all across the body like a fire. A sense of warmth around your chest. Now, before, at the state of sila, going into samadhi, You saw that through your actions. Oh, I shouldn't have stolen that. I shouldn't have scolded the person. I shouldn't have hit the person. Very gross. When you cross over, now it is more internal, where you won't be doing any of that. But what happens is you feel that hindrance like a fire in your body. You actually feel it. That's the warmth that you're referring to, right, Dil? Right? That's that sense of warmth. Hold on, please. Right? That's that sense of warmth that is referred to. Now, that sense of warmth, right, like the hindrances, has a sense of attachment there. That attachment is what manifests that warmth, that clinging, that attraction, not attraction actually, that bond that we have with that specific mentality or hindrance that arises, right? So as we grow in our vipassana, what happens is we realize that connection, and our hindrances are suppressed to a deeper level and state that it comes by this. Now, for example, if we are to talk about the arupa jhanas, by this state, we have that part is long gone in vipassana, right? That state is long gone in vipassana, right? So do you have anything?
Yeah, just to say,
I want
yeah,
to just
no,
finish.
yeah, no, Bante, I wasn't referring to that. What I was referring to is not that. This was, I think, in reference to when somebody had gone into, I think this was, I can't remember the Ajambrano, when somebody had gone into a deep stage of jhana, and the family were very upset, and they had taken him to hospital with this Nirodha Samapatya, and everything, all the life faculties weren't there, and you are not even breathing, or to a noticeable extent. Obviously, there was fine breathing, so subtle. But what they were saying was, what they were referring to is, the only thing is, so the heart rate wasn't there, the brain waves, everything was negative. But they said what was there was, one is this clarity of this pure mind, which a dead person wouldn't have. That was one different. One was this life force, which was there, which was so subtle that it could be noticed. And then they said there was the body heat, that was what the difference was. This is nothing about the heat that one feels. At that level, that is what I was referring to, not the gross level of heat. So somebody was saying that's the difference between the stage of Nirodha Samapatti, when someone goes and when you don't have anything, and all the doctors all thought he was dead, and then suddenly got up, and what was there was this Ayu, which we're talking with the final, and that if you look at a dead person's mind would be all sort of blank with nothing, but this mind is very luminous. And this third thing was that the temperature of the body doesn't drop down, like as soon as you die, the temperature of the body dies. That is what I was referring to. And then I think somebody called that usnota, but it's not this feeling of heat. It wasn't a different. But anyway, Bante,
Maybe
that's
you
okay.
can that what exactly it was, Dil, but
yeah,
really
that's how it was referred to. Thank you, Bante. But
yeah.
I followed that.
All right. Shall we finish the sutra really quick, please? We have 5 minutes. All right. Now, universality of abiding in happiness, in emptiness, right? Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmin in the past, page number 49, please. Brahmin in the past who attained to and abided in the pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness. They all attained and abided in the same utterly pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness. Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmin in the future who will attain to and abide in the pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness, they all will attain to and abide in this same utterly pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness. Ananda, whatever recluse and Brahmin in the present who attain to and abide in the pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness, they all attain to and abide in the same utterly pure and supreme, unsurpassed emptiness. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourself thus. We will attain to and abide in the utterly pure, supreme, unsurpassed emptiness. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Ananda rejoiced and approved of the Blessed One's word. Now, when it comes to the practice, that is the end of the sutta. When it comes to the practice, right? When it comes to the practice of, once there are bhikkhus who, having attained to emptiness, right, would choose to be with emptiness and not with Nirodha Samapatti as well in certain occasions. However, people then sort of through textual scripts then talk about, and even back in the time talk about, what is the purpose. The Buddha says, what the Buddha says, like that last paragraph, what it said, it is the same thing. It is a arahant by default would be one who abides in the emptiness, right? Who abides in the emptiness because of the lack of attraction, because not the lack of attraction, because of the lack of that greed, that tanha, which allows or creates that connection towards the 5 aggregates of being, right? Remember, we all exist and we continue to exist because of the 5 aggregates, because of the craving that we have towards the 5 aggregates. That is what keeps this attraction and being in samsara possible. Now, that is the end of the sutta, right? So we go through these stages, we flourish from those low levels of attraction to mundane, and then we go on to those which are jhana, and then we, from the jhanas, rupa jhanas, we go into that which is the arupa jhanas. From the arupa jhanas, we go into this state of shunyata by turning the vipassana over the last jhana onto the mind which perceives, the mind which is aware, right? Allowing the mind to go into a state of shunyata. Should impermanence be the factor of clarification through vipassana towards the existence, right? To existence. By existence, what I now mean is whatever connection which is left between the mind and the base of perception and non-perception. Whatever that little, which is that tiny tad bit which is left, the mind is turned, or rather the contemplation now appears towards that which contemplates, right? Turn in that vipassana. If it is impermanence, then what is achieved is Suññata Samadhi. If it is, right, right. If the person, when we say that the person is no longer conditioned by those things which are painful, meaning, like, for example, avidya. Yesterday, I mean, Abhidhamma Day, I gave you the definition of avidya, right? Avidya is anything that causes pain, or anything that causes pain in the future, right? That avidya, when that avidya, or when the person or being is not attracted or is not clinging on to that which causes pain, that is where we say that person has attained through undirected samadhi, right? Where now this is a state where the person now is able to be within a space of samadhi, right, without any attraction to those things based out of avidya, or those things fueled by avidya, namely the different signs you see. The attraction that we have to different signs through the distractions that we have developed through the hindrances. That is what we refer to as the undirected mind, right? To the undirected mind. Now, when we get rid of the notion of permanence, now it is the notion of permanence that in our mind, for example, like I said, we are trying to do metta towards someone, but then we cling on to this sort of hatred that we have, regardless of whether the hatred is gross or subtle, right? That when we get rid of that perception of permanence, to say that this persists, that is when we attain to what we call Animate Samadhi. Where we are Animate Samadhi. What is Animate Samadhi? We are saying this does not exist, right? We are saying this does not exist. But another part of the mind is saying, no, I'm not so sure. Maybe it does actually exist, right? When that mind is no longer there, meaning that's permanence, you see. You think that it is constant. You experience you're eating a sweet or something really nice, and you want it to keep on there. That is that possibility of permanence, the notion of permanence in your mind, you see. Right? You are disrupted by something and you cling on to it. The more that you cling on to it, it grows from frustration to hatred to aversion to upadana. Right? Where now you become like a snake going behind its prey, right? To that amount, right? Why? Because of that sense that this is going to persist. We don't think of it in that way, but the underlying tendency which supports that element to be is the attraction towards the notion of permanence. When we get rid of that, what happens is Animate Samadhi. What is that Animate Samadhi? When you are able to be aware, observe, without clinging on to anything that arises in your mind, you see. You know, when you close your eyes and when you're trying to meditate, you know, someone, you know, these houses, you know, you can hear everything almost that happens, or the creaking of the floors, or, you know, whatnot, right? Sometimes, right? And then you're sort of annoyed. Now, see, I'm meditating, someone is making a sound, so now you're a bit annoyed. That's a nimitta. Animitta is when you're not burdened by that anymore. Not because do not think that this is because you're pushing it aside or avoiding it or not thinking about it. You know it is so, but it does not burden you anymore because you are not clinging on to constants. You're not clinging on to that notion of permanence. That is when Animita Samadhi arises. Right? That is when Animita Samadhi arises. Okay? Now, I'm taking a couple minutes more, please, if you would allow me, right? So that we finish the entirety of the sutta. Now, when let's come on to page number 43, please, right? Let's come on to page number 43. With regard to the abiding in emptiness, etc., by the arahants who wish to abide in insight without fruition attainment. One, with regard to abiding in emptiness, etc., by arahants who wish to abide in insight without fruition attainment. Sorry. Meaning, not going into Nirodha Samapatti, going into Anamitta, emptiness meditation, right? Abiding in emptiness, Suññata.
What page are we?
43. Right? 43, that sort of paragraph in the middle. 1. Having seen danger in clinging to oneself, athabhi nivesa, they are inclined to the abiding in emptiness. In emptiness, they see the fall by equanimity regarding formations under the aspect of abiding in emptiness. 2. Having seen the danger in the characteristic of conditioned realities, sankhara nimitta, they are inclined to the senseless abiding animitta vihara. They see the fall by equanimity regarding formations under the aspect of signless abiding. Does that make that clear what I just explained a couple moments ago? Someone is making a sound around the house, right? Now, it is not that you push it aside or you're blasé about it. You know, however, it does not. Why? The fall. You know that it is not constant, you see. The fall with equanimity, which makes you're aware, however, you're equanimous about it. That sense of equanimity does not pronounce the fact that you are attached to that. That is where Animitta arises. Then, having seen danger in the steadfastness of clinging, they are inclined to the undirected abiding upper nihita vihara, they see the fall of conditioned dhammas by equanimity regarding the formations under the aspect of undirected abiding, right? Undirected abiding, meaning now this is referring to living without that sense of attachment to formations, right? In general, with equanimity, right? Now, as you would understand, and as anyone would understand, who would understand this sutta in its entirety would understand that this is a very subtle state that we need to then slowly step on. This is the real deal, everyone, right? And it is in regards to that real deal that we talk about letting go of pettiness, letting go of, forgiveness, letting go, dana, sila, all of that. It is to, in every way of the word, to say, to let go of that which is mundane, to enlighten yourself, meaning to unburden yourself in a way that you are able to develop wisdom. And this is where wisdom becomes the ultimate tool of understanding, ultimate bridge of understanding, to realize that in 3 ways, and those are the 3 ways that we have just finished, that where we are able to abide with regards to formations, we are able to understand its decline. With decline, with regards to that which arises or that which causes craving, we know that there is decline in that as well. With regards to formations, we know that there is decline as well. And with regards to abiding in the empty, knowing without any distraction or perceiving without distraction, which is the Suññata Samadhi, right? In those 3 ways. So everything that we would choose to be doing, right? If we are serious about the path, we unburden ourselves right now with these sort of little things, because really the true war, if I am to put it in that way, is with yourself, not with the world around you. It is with ourselves. The wars that we choose to have with people around us is truly the sort of the weaknesses of ourselves in that way as well. Now, this does not mean that people don't do any wrong to you. Yes, people do wrong to you. People constantly may do wrong to you. Even your own children might do you wrong. However, if you choose to make another man's wrong committed towards you, your aching complaint for the rest of your life, that is not on that person, that is on you. That is on you. That man did one action, you chose to abuse yourself consistently through your little short life based on that. That is on you, not that man. Especially when we know the Dhamma. Especially, so you forgive. Yes, for those who can forgive, knowing the weaknesses of man, good, but truly the person you liberate through forgiving is yourself. Is yourself. That is where you like you're sort of enlightening yourself in a very mundane sense. You let go of those things that bound you, because look here, how many things are we here to do? To be able to look at the subtle maneuvering of the mind to direct vipassana towards our whole entire existence. These are not easy things, right? In this way, each and every part, don't think, oh, I'll just focus on my anger towards this person on a later date, I'll focus on this part. No, not going to work. It's sila, samadhi, panya. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. That is because that is to strengthen. You don't want to build a bridge. If you're building a bridge, you build it proper, or else you don't have to build it. And then for when you're midway through the bridge collapses and breaks and kills you. You're never going to get back on the path. You're not. It's just like, for example, Anapanasati, I've told you, do not follow the breath in. When you start developing those sort of different pains and all of that, you will stop practicing Anapana for a good amount of time because of that acute pain or whatever that arises as a manifestation of it. When you practice wrong and something bad happens, you will stop practicing. Why? The bridge is weak. You fell. And now it takes far more effort to rebuild the bridge again, because why? You must buy the wood again. You must buy the rope again. You must buy everything again. Why? Because the wood, the rope, everything that you bought first is down in the river. So make everything that you're choosing to sort of build that bridge, make sure that you're building it top, first class, right at your first going. Don't do half-ass things in that way. Because that is when you build a strong foundation. Strong foundation. Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And I hope you read the sutta, and don't think in any way, oh, this is too deep for us. Don't think that. Absorb it, let it sink into you, because this is ultimately the truth of life. This is the truth of life. All the distractions that we choose to live with, this is it, right? I mean, most of you all professionals, masters of your trade, you've done all of that, and still you feel a sense of, something's missing. Isn't it? I mean, this is true for both you and me. I'm not like telling this, but this is the reality of human beings, animals, everyone. Up until that sense of missingness is tanha. It's not the fact that there is actually something missing. What is missing is that sense of missingness is created by that tanha, by that nature in your mind that compares everything and everything under the blue moon, right? To get rid of that, we realize the natures which govern that, right? The natures that govern that. So do not think, okay, Suññata, this is too deep for me. No, this is the reality of your life as it is mine, right? This is as much as I am sort of elucidating the teachings through what I have learned and all of that. Remember, I am in it as much as you are, right? And we are all on a path, trying to daily make ourselves less viable to greed, hatred, delusion, and conditions that take us to states that we will not be able to develop our mind, right? Develop our mind. So don't think that this is too far more, too advanced for you. This is very much a part of you as it is, part of everyone else, right? All right then. So I think we've taken enough time for today. We will do another sutta next week. And does anyone have any questions? Yes, Hema Mali.
Bante, we can is it that's true, no, Bante, that we can use Anapanasati Bhavana as a samatha as well as vipassana, is it?
Sure, you can.
Yeah. So can you please explain a little bit how we can use samatha and vipassana? Is it?
Yes. Thank you, Hema Mali.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Now, what we essentially do, first of all, when we start practicing Anapana, we don't do vipassana.
Right. Yeah.
We only turn it to Anapana when we have a stable amount of concentration, samadhi, right? How do we turn anything into vipassana? By noting the impermanence, suffering, and non-self within that element of the breath. Example, when the breath arises and passes away, there is a fall in every breath that takes place. There's a constant change in every moment of the breath in that process of breathing. That is your impermanence right there. Right? That is your impermanence right there. That is how noting that impermanence within the breath. Before, as samatha, what we did was we noted the in-breath and the out-breath, the in-breath and the out-breath without any notions of impermanence, without any notions of impermanent suffering and non-self. Now, when we develop samadhi or a state of samadhi to a certain
it's a very simple thing how to make an anapan from samatha to vipassana.
Yes. So when we go on to that contemplation, we are mindful of the switch. Now, the most important part is that switching, right? Now, for people, sometimes this is a very confusing stage because we are used to the fact of observing the breath in a certain particular way. What we do is we keep on observing the breath as a samatha object, right? But while or when we are switching on to vipassana, what we do is we take impermanence or that notion of impermanence, not in a way that it is abstract, but in a way that it is definite within that time. So it is not, for example, if this is the breath, it's not this, and this is vipassana. It's not this. The element of impermanence is within this, right? Within this. It is that element that we try to comprehend within the anapana of that moment, right? Within the anapana of that moment. But remember, we only do this when we arrive at a certain state of samadhi with regards to anapana. With regards to anapana. With regards to anapana. Specifically, that would be the state where we are able to observe the breath without controlling the breath. Going beyond that state to when the breath becomes, or we start experiencing states of emptiness, or a sense of voidness really with the breath, with regard to the breath. And then realizing through that state of voidness, we realize the body of the breath afterwards in a deeper sense, because now the awareness is the breath itself. At that point, we can turn it into vipassana, right? At that point, we can turn it into vipassana. But if your anapana hemali is doing good, don't break it, let it do better. That is what I would say. If anyone's anapana is good, don't break it, let it grow, become better. Because if it is good already and you can see the breath without controlling it, fantastic. You're really lucky, right? If you can do that, let it grow. No need to bring any other subjects at that point, right? Let it grow to a state where you are very comfortable with that technique of samadhi. And then you can sort of turn it into vipassana when you are now confident that you have achieved to a certain state of samadhi that has an amount of power, right? Or else doing a bit of anapana for a week and then turning into vipassana, it's not going to do anything. Right? Because remember, the reason that we do anapana, is wholly because we want to suppress the hindrances. Some might think that this is a very, very simple thing, but in the whole detail of things, this is a very, very, very difficult task to do. So thank you, Hemali, for asking what might seem like a simple question. However, the more you know, the better about this, because I know living in forest monasteries where is very sort of ardent, where a lot of ardent monks live. Some monks struggle with this for 3-4 months. There are some monks who struggle with not being able to see the breath for 6 months, 1 year sometimes, you know. So it takes an amount of effort, because to understand that maneuvering, to understand that letting go, right? To understand that sense of letting go. So that is important. So thank you, Hemali, for asking that question. Some might think that that was a simple question, but you know, when you put it into practice, that's a very difficult part to realize. And the more that you know about it, the better, right? The more that you know about it, the better. So thank you, Hemali. I hope I've explained it to you. Maybe
Yes.
you could also ask Venerable Simalapitiya as well. I'm sure he would give an even better example, elucidation of the same, right? Okay, but don't be concerned about switching it if your Anapana is already good. Let it develop. Yeah?
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you very much. I will see you all on Saturday. Just a reminder that the children's classes have now started. So if you have grandchildren or children, I don't know who you has children, but anyone, send them over. It's a 30-minute class from 11 to 11:30, right? So take care. Thank you everyone for your time, and have a lovely rest of the week, right? Teruvan Sannai.